Hello, it's Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with my week of reading wrap-up. This is where I talk about the books that I read, what I'm currently reading, and potentially could read next week based on my mood. So let's get straight into it since I had a great week. Starting off with If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha. This was a book that I've seen buzzed about, I've seen people talk about, and I just was in the mood for. I did this in a combination of audio and looking at the text, and it was a really great combination because I think both forms brought something to it. This is the story of multiple women, 4 young women who all live in the same office town in Seoul, Korea, in the Gangnam district. And they all live very different lives, but are connected thematically because of all of the challenges for women at work. A lot of them are dealing with challenges at work in different types of careers and also in love. This is a debut novel, which I was incredibly impressed that she was able to create such interesting, dynamic women that had good backstories, strong characters. Each voice felt unique, and was able to bring them all together in a way that I liked. Now, the ending was a little fast, but I didn't mind that. I didn't mind it. And I'm not really sure where else you could have ended it. But I thought this was a really great debut. I wrote a longer review with a little bit more detail at my blog. So I'll put a link to that below if you'd like to check that out. Then I grabbed from my Book of the Month Club choice, Mourier by Bryan Washington. Now, I know a lot of people love Lot, which was his short story collection. I'm not a short story person, so I haven't checked it out, even though I've been told that it's a short story collection that at least interconnects the stories, which I like a little bit more. I really enjoyed this. I thought this was quite interesting. And I did the same thing as I did with If I Had Your Face. I did a combination of audio and reading the book itself. Bryan Washington himself is one of the people who narrates one of the characters here, which was an interesting choice on the audio. And it really brought out something that I don't think I would have experienced from reading the book, which is this sense of, I don't want to say passivity, but this emotional distance and quiet frustration. The story is about a gay couple. Ben, his full name is Benson, but he goes by Ben, and Mike. They're an interracial couple. Mike is Japanese American, and Ben is African American, a Black man, and they are living in Houston. And they're at a point in their relationship where the relationship has kind of stagnated and is kind of stale. And there's a lot of things unsaid or unspoken, and they're at an impasse where they're not communicating with each other. And you're not sure if it's because they don't know what they want, or is that they're afraid of what would happen in the future. There's just a lot of frustrating male inability to communicate. So I liked that aspect of what felt like hesitancy and whatevers and shrugs and whatever you want, kind of banter back and forth, where people are where they're walking around issues and not really talking about it. And you at first that can be frustrating, but you very quickly have to unwrap all of that because Mike does something that throws a wrench into this whole relationship, in that he brings his mother to stay with them for a visit. His Japanese mother, who has lived in the United States and speaks English, but she doesn't really know Ben. And then Mike leaves. And he goes to Osaka because he found out that his father, who he's been estranged from for many, many years, is dying. So he's left his mother, who he has a strange, almost estranged relationship with his boyfriend, that they're having an estranged, difficult relationship. They have to kind of deal together with what's happening. They don't really understand what's going on because he's not communicating. And then Mike goes to Osaka and deals with his father, who also is not good at communicating. And you start to see the effects of poor communication and adaptation and just acceptance and love from family and how that impacts the generations. And there's also a lot about how the families did not understand or accept their homosexuality and what that rejection actually looks like. In some cases, it's just denial. In other cases, it's straight up just not wanting to talk about it and not dealing with it, and estrangement. So there's a lot here. I thought the writing was really beautiful. It's just there's a lot of isolation. If you feel the loneliness that you can have in a relationship when it's going south, and where you're trying and you're not really sure how to bridge the connect. I thought it was lovely, and I was very impressed. Now, the book does interesting things in that there's photos and other things. I don't know that it needed it. Interesting authorial decision there. So that was Memorial. Then for my In Real Life book club, we are reading the Booker list, the short list, and for last year's Booker, this is This Mournable Body by Tsitsi Dangarembga. I just love this cover. I just think it's so great. And on the back, you get this kind of sliver of Harare right there. This is such an interesting book. It really took me places that I did not expect and was not prepared for. For all of us, this was kind of chaotic, and we were left adrift at really knowing how to put our feet down in this book. This is the third of the series, and this is always something that bothers me when people are like, "Oh, the book can stand alone." I have no way to know if that's true, because it did feel like we were so out of our depth in many, many situations. We were out of our depth because, first of all, the book is told in second person, which is already kind of a jarring experience when everything's you. So that starts it off. But secondly, it's very centered in Zimbabwean culture. There's a lot of slang. There's a lot of cultural references. There are a lot of just conversations and vocabulary that just was completely unfamiliar to me. So you have those two things. And then you also have characters that just kind of appear, and we don't know if were in previous stories and if this is a continuation. So it makes for a kind of jarring entry point. The last third of the book really brings it all together and becomes way more interesting and linear. And I think it's because at the beginning, we really are seeing a woman who's suffering, and that suffering is splintering her. She is fractured. She is not dealing well with life and suffers a mental breakdown. So as you can see, there's a lot going on here. There's so much about modern day Zimbabwe in this book, in her denial of the village, wanting to make it on her own in the city, but not really having not starting from a level playing field where it makes it possible. And the same thing is true with Zimbabwe as a whole. When it got independence, it had already been neglected for so many years by British colonialism. So it's not as if a handoff from one power to another was equitable. The independent government was starting from such a deficit that the foundation was rocky and shaky. And that's what feels like so much with her story. We have Tambudze, who's the main narrator, but who speaks through you. You is used frequently, and this is really her story, and she's just beaten down. I think it's a remarkable book. I do want to go back and read the first two to kind of follow along. Being someone who was raised in Mozambique and lived in Southern Africa when Zimbabwe went through their independence, I felt like I wanted to understand better. I wanted to understand more. So I'll be reading the first two as a way to kind of catch up on the series. But I liked it much more than I expected, and the ending really brought it home for me, and made a huge difference. And I'm actually curious if she's going to do more in this series, because it feels like there's a lot more that can be said as this character grows. So that's that one. Then I had a arc that I needed to wrap up. I think I've mentioned that I have a bunch of NetGalley arcs that I have been woefully horrible at keeping up with. And this is one that I wanted to read. This is Manderly Forever by Tatiana de Rosnay, translated by Sam Taylor. This is a biography of Daphne du Maurier. Now, I, like so many people, really enjoyed Rebecca. It's the only thing that I've read from Daphne du Maurier, though I know my friend Leo from Little Book Life is a huge fan. So I was already biased toward liking this, interested in it. I know that Tatiana de Rosnay is a novelist, and I think this is her first foray into biography. And I think that my problem was stylistic with this book. If it hadn't been called a biography, and if it had just been a story inspired by Daphne du Maurier, pulling different pieces of her life and fleshing it out, I probably would have liked this better. But having it being called a biography on the cover led me to have expectations. And the expectations I have is that, yes, that the story is well told, but I expect a little bit of reserve or a little bit of academic objectivity to the material. I felt that the writing was kind of overdone and overhyped, and it was just too much. And I think too much license was taken. She uses present tense as we're going through. So it's like this from the beginning to the end of her life. There's not really a lot of contextualization of what's happening, which is what I mean by that remove, where you can kind of be in the moment, but stand behind and say, okay, then given this, given that, what we understand, this is a context that might be important to know. There wasn't any of that. It was almost like just the story of this woman's life. And I also feel like I couldn't tell what was dramatized and what was real. It just felt a little too, the style did not work for me. And she interjects herself in the book too in strange places, and so it just felt a little too much. I did not enjoy it, even though I learned interesting things about Daphne du Maurier. But I'm side-eyeing through the entire book, so this was a miss for me. And another miss for me, which I was very surprised about, another arc that I needed to finish. This is Antipolti and the Handsome Antonio by Mario Giordano, translated by John Brownjohn. Now, I've raved about how fun I find this series. It's a series about an older woman. She is a German woman who has family in Sicily, who have moved down to Sicily from Germany, and she's always romanticized Sicily and has wanted, since the death of her husband, to just drink herself to death while viewing the landscape of Sicily. And she is kind of randy and bawdy and outlandish and audacious, and she's just a big character. what I found in what I loved about the first two started to grate on my nerves in the third. And what was, for me, farce is fun with a light touch, but if it's too much, then you lose me. So I just think that it went too far down that bizarre, farcical, ridiculous route that I just couldn't follow along and enjoy it in the same way. So I think this is the end of the road for me and Auntie Poldie. I think this might be my end point, which is unfortunate because I really enjoyed the first two. But if you like farcical and if you like really silly, some silliness and adventure and all that, this might be a series for you. So that's what I read. Let's talk about what I'm currently reading. Again, still with the Proust. This is volume 2, in Search of Lost Time, in the Shadow of Young Girls in Flower. Reading this with Leo of A Little Book Life. You'll still see this for a long time because we read this very slowly. Then I'm reading The Return, Fathers, Sons, and the Land in Between by Hisham Matar. This is very emotional, and so I pick it up lightly here and there. That's why I've read other things, but this is just very interesting, challenging, emotionally challenging material. So I'm taking this slowly. But his writing is exceptional. So good, so straightforward, but really compelling. And the story that he's telling is remarkable. This is a nonfiction book about his true life, returning to Libya after many, many years in exile. His father was a rebel against Gaddafi regime and was kidnapped and taken and put in political prison and has never been seen again, to the point where they assume he has died, but they've never received confirmation. This is when he, his mother, and brother, as well as his wife, decide to go back to Libya for the very first time. Very emotional story. Then on audio, I'm listening to The Borrowed by Ho-Kei, translated by Jeremy Tiang. This is a really, really interesting police procedural. I'm enjoying it very much. I'm about 30% through. The audio is very good. So we'll see where it goes, but already enjoying it immensely. Then I decided to pick this up on a Lark last night. I have meant to read this for forever. This is Lolly Willows by Sylvia Townsend Warner. I get the joy. I get why this is so loved. I am only, I would say 40 pages in, but I'm already entranced. The writing is just so beautiful and comforting and enjoyable. I'm not going to say too much more about this. I'll have more to talk about it next time. But this was the very first Book of the Month Club submission. Release is a better way to say it. And this is a reissue that they did. I'm going to put a Book of the Month referral link below in case you want to join. They've just been putting out really interesting material as of late, and I have been enjoying a lot of it. And then the very last thing that, again, I'm trying to bust through my backlist of ARCs. This is Death of Victoria Doc, Phryne Fisher, number 4 from Carrie Greenwood. Now, I didn't realize that this was 4, and I'd read 9 before. Raisins and Almonds I think I wrapped that up last week. So I should have paid more attention to that. So I'm going back to 4 and reading this. But as always, as I expected, Phryne Fisher is just a great character, and the writing is fantastic. I actually am happy that I started with Raisins and Almonds because the writing was so sumptuous at the beginning, because it opened at a party and we got the sense of setting was intense. This one opens with a bang, with someone shooting at her car as she's driving near the docks, which is exciting, but it's not luring me in the same way that the 9th did. I'm enjoying it, so we'll see where it goes from here. Then next week, I have a couple books I need to get started on. The first is The Shadow King by Maza Mengistu. This is part of the Booker shortlist with my In Real Life book club. So we're rolling from what we just read, this Mournable Body, into this, keeping with the theme of African women and warriors. So excited to jump into this. And then I also need to read my book spin book, Things in Jars by Jess Kidd. So these two need to get worked on as well. And then who knows what I might also decide to read. Your guess is as good as mine. So that's all I have today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week. As always, I'm always curious, have you read any of these? What were your thoughts? And please don't forget, we are still in a global pandemic. So maintain safe social distance, wear 2 masks, wash your hands, and don't touch your face. That's it for me for now. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.